Yo, what's up, y'all? My name is Drew, and I am a Korean adoptee currently living in the state of Texas. I was born in March of 1986 in Seoul, South Korea, and of course, given up for adoption. Um, Me, just like many CAD stories that I've seen, was told from the moment I had a question that I was abandoned at a fire station and ultimately put into the adoption system. And I don't know about y'all, but a lot of stories that I've seen, and even in my own personal testimony of being an adoptee, is that you grow up feeling almost unloved. And if you're, like me, I struggled with identity, struggling how to fit in. I had white parents. I grew up on military bases. I didn't really know where I fit in. And so that caused some sort of identity crisis in me where I didn't understand why I didn't look like my parents. I didn't have a normal family structure, and I didn't ask those questions. And if I'm being totally transparent with y'all, I literally chose not to be curious, not to ask questions, and almost felt as if it was either disrespectful or, you know, careless to ask questions because of the fact that these people had decided to choose me from a bad situation. And so I grew up my entire life pretty much harboring those feelings of insignificance, not fitting in, and not truly knowing who I was. Fast forward, I know this is crazy, but for those of you who are watching and are absent context, adoption in South Korea became huge right after the Korean War, which was from 1950 to 1953. We don't have a 100% factual number, but I can state clearly from the documentaries and the research that I've done that hundreds of thousands of Korean children were put into the adoption system since that time. I know a lot of people are going to have their views on why that may have been, whether it was cultural, whether it was political, whether it was for financial gain, whatever it may be. And I want to be sensitive to everyone's kind of feelings on why it was. But nonetheless, hundreds of thousands of children were spread out all across the world from South Korea. And from most of the stories that I've seen, feel pretty similar to how I felt, which was, I don't have a curiosity because these are now my parents. And I, grew up with their ideologies. I grew up with their cultures. I grew up with their food. I grew up with, their belief system. And I literally got to a point where it was, these are my parents, and I'm not going to worry about anything that happened before my life in America began. And then one day I reconnected with someone that I went to high school with and went to their home as an invited guest for a meal. And I met this person's mother, and I walked in the home, was cordial and respectful, and walked into the kitchen to meet her. And she pretty much looked at me with a care, a true care, a genuine care. She was Korean as well. And she said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure, go for it." And she said, Do you ever like wonder about your mom?" I said, "Honestly, no. I just haven't. I consider, my parents that raised me to be my parents." And she started to cry, and she said, "I gave up a child. He's around your age now, and I've always wondered if he wonders about me." And she went into the history. She shared what had happened. And I'm not going to lie to y'all, man, it really messed me up. And I came home and I shared with my wife, and I said, "Look, like, this is what happened." And ultimately we started to do research and found out that there was a heavy potential that, the story that I was told may not have been true circumstantially. And so we started to do research. I ended up sending a adoption records request, and I started a birth record search, a birth family search, and took a trip to South Korea with my wife and visited for the first time since being adopted. At the time I was 38 years old, so I had never been back. Got there, and it was an emotional and cultural shock to me. I spent a lot of nights crying. I wasn't sure if it was gratitude or if it was just the fact that I was in a place that I felt attached to but had no knowledge of, that I was walking by people and viewing a culture that I should be a part of but had no absolute idea of what that looked like. And so it was just emotional overall for me. And I ended up getting back from Korea and I got an email, no joke, that literally the day that we arrived back in America, and it stated that they had found my adoption records. And in the adoption records, the story was very different than what I had been told my whole life. It was true that I had been abandoned, but it was untrue that I was unloved. I'll spare y'all the details, but ultimately the record showed that I was actually born out of wedlock and because of a crime. And my birth mother was very young at the time, and she desired for me to have a better life than she was going to be able to provide. And so that's how I ended up in the adoption system. So be mindful that my entire life I felt like I had been discarded, unwanted, unloved, a burden. And then I found out in literal moments that none of that was true. And it messed me up. And I don't know what part of the process y'all are in, but I've seen a lot of stories. And I know a lot of people have questions. A lot of people desire that closure or the open door to even like their birth family, their birth mother, whatever it may be. I've recently received contact with my birth mother. There's been some back and forth, very, very short, but ultimately hopeful that a potential meetup will be taking place soon. And I just want to come on here and make a video and tell some of you guys and girls, like, I don't know what you've grown up believing about yourself, but I want you to know that no matter how our lives started, no matter what stories y'all were told, no matter what you've been carrying, that man, you have value, and that you are important, and that no matter what the story was, you're here for a reason. And so man, I'm truly hopeful for each of you that not only you find healed hearts, but that you find closure. And whether that means you ever find or you don't ever find the answers that you desire, that you would still be able to find peace in your own life. And so, hey man, if you're a KAD, let's connect. Hit me up. I'd love to hear your story, what part of the process you're in, if you're even in the process, or answer the questions that you may have to the best of my ability. But I plan to be back in Korea here soon. Maybe if any of y'all are going to be there, we can link up. But hey, we all have something very special in common, which is, being an adoptee. And so, hey, follow along and let's see where this takes us. I pray for each and every one of y'all, and I look forward to the stories and the connections to be made from this point forward.